Did you know that our planet once hosted a giant that weighed up to 100 tons? That wasn't Godzilla, nor was it any monster from the movies you've seen. It was Argentinosaurus, the last titan of Earth, a creature that once forced the planet itself to bow under its weight. But what if that titan were still alive today? Would the modern world, with its cities, vehicles, and people, be big enough to contain a creature weighing 100 tons? The answer lies in the journey you're about to witness, where science meets imagination, and the past breathes again through every breath of a giant. Some great discoveries begin with a small mistake, and the story of Argentinosaurus, the largest creature ever to walk the Earth, is one of them. In 1987, in Neuquén province, Argentina, Guillermo Heredia happened to spot something enormous sticking out of a field. He thought it was a petrified tree trunk, but in fact it was a gigantic leg bone as thick as a human torso. When experts from the Carmen Funes Museum arrived to inspect it, they realized Heredia had just uncovered traces of a massive creature never before known. 2 years later, paleontologist José F. Bonaparte, a legend of South America, came to excavate. Beneath the soil of the farm, his team uncovered more gigantic vertebrae as large as car tires. Bonaparte understood they were facing a species unlike anything in the fossil record. By 1996, more femur bones were discovered in the Huincul Formation, an ancient sedimentary region formed in the late Cretaceous period, about 97 to 93 million years ago. Although no complete skeleton has ever been found, the remaining bones are enough to reconstruct a creature over 35 meters long and more than 90 tons in weight, a living mountain. In 1993, Bonaparte officially named the species Argentinosaurus huinculensis, meaning the Argentine lizard from Huincul. The name echoed throughout the scientific world, not just as a new species, but as the upper limit of life on land. Argentinosaurus belonged to the Titanosaur group, long-necked herbivores that dominated South America at the time. Even with only a few bones, scientists believe it was a basal titanosaur, an ancestor of later giants like Patagodoton or Dreadnoughtus. It lived in a warm, humid environment rich in vegetation, a place where gravity, climate, and food supply all allowed gigantism to exist. Before this species was discovered, people believed that land animals could not exceed 60 tons. Argentinosaurus shattered that limit. Beside an African elephant, a paleontologist once said, it would look like a puppy. Now imagine, you're standing in a wild, untouched land of South America, where distant mountains are still veiled in mist, and the wind moves through treetops 10 times taller than a human being. The ground trembles slow, deep and heavy like a drumbeat rising from the earth. A single leaf falls, then the entire forest begins to shift, not because of the wind, but because something enormous is approaching. Before skyscrapers existed, before humans walked the earth, even before the oceans formed as we know them today, the planet was once home to true giants. Not the giants of fairy tales, but flesh and bone behemoths. Hundreds of tons of living weight moving through dense forests. These creatures walked not to dominate, but simply to survive. They ate, breathed, and lived in a world where everything was exaggerated. Trees as tall as towers, insects the size of a human hand, and every rainfall capable of turning the ground into a massive sea of mud. This was the Cretaceous period, nearly 100 million years ago. An age when Earth was warm, lush, and overflowing with life. And among that wilderness existed a creature far beyond anything humans could imagine. Argentinosaurus. Think of it as a walking building. More than 35 meters long, nearly 100 tons in weight. A creature so huge that if you stood beneath its feet, all you would see is shade. Each of its steps created a small tremor. Each tilt of its head could sweep aside an entire bush. In a world full of gigantic creatures, it still stood out as a living record. a symbol of the maximum extreme evolution ever allowed to exist. It was one of the largest animals ever to walk on land, a plant-eating giant whose shadow alone could cover an entire house. For decades, Argentinosaurus was regarded as the largest dinosaur ever discovered, and a leading contender for the title of the biggest land-dwelling creature in Earth's history. Interestingly, we have never found a complete skeleton of Argentinosaurus. Everything we know about it is pieced together from scattered bones, a few vertebrae, a leg bone, and the obsessively careful calculations of scientists. To estimate its size, researchers had to compare bone proportions with those of its closer relatives, then scale them up using 3D models and mechanical simulations. The result? Every researcher ended up with a different giant number. Gregory Paul in 1994 suggested it was about 30 to 35 meters long. Kenneth Carpenter in 2006 estimated 30 meters, while William Sellers in 2013 boldly raised it to 39 meters, nearly as long as 3 school buses lined up. Even the most conservative estimate by Scott Hartman, 27 meters, made every other land animal seem tiny. As for weight, estimates range from 75 to 120 tons, equivalent to the weight of 10 African elephants combined. An average adult could reach 75 tons, equal to 6 London double-decker buses. And imagine this. Each time it set its foot down, the force it generated was equivalent to the weight of a landing jet airliner. The body of Argentinosaurus was the ultimate test of biological endurance. It stood up to 17 meters tall, the height of a 6-story building. Its 4 limbs were not legs in the ordinary sense, but massive pillars, each 5 to 6 meters tall and as thick as an ancient tree trunk. These legs not only supported a 75-ton body, but also absorbed all the impact while moving. Its neck stretched up to 13 meters long, extending like a biological bridge connecting body and head. Its head was strangely small, almost disproportionate to its massive body, but that was precisely the key to reducing weight at the farthest point of the body, preventing the neck from breaking or losing balance. Its torso was 6 meters deep, 9 meters long, and its tail made up nearly half of the remaining length, about 14 to 15 meters, serving both as a counterbalance and as a defensive weapon when necessary. But the biggest question scientists always ask is, how could its heart even function? To pump blood from its chest all the way to its brain, a distance of nearly 12 meters. The heart of Argentinosaurus had to generate 3 to 4 times the pressure of an elephant's heart. It is estimated that the heart weighed up to 400 kilograms, beating roughly 50 to 60 times per minute to keep blood circulating continuously. Its lungs were unlike those of most land animals and more similar to birds, composed of multiple auxiliary air sacs that allowed oxygen to flow efficiently throughout its gigantic body. This structure helped titanosaurs breathe deeply without collapsing under their own weight. Researchers call this nature's optimal biomechanical engineering, where every detail was evolutionarily refined to balance mass, oxygen, and energy. If anything was more impressive than its size, it was the journey of its growth. At birth, a baby Argentinosaurus weighed only about 5 kilograms, the size of a large turkey. But within 40 years, it had to grow from 5 kilograms to 75,000 kilograms. That means each day it grew about 40 kilograms, nearly the weight of a 10-year-old child. To maintain this growth rate, they needed 100,000 calories per day, the equivalent of continuously eating hundreds of kilograms of plants. However, their bodies operated with extreme efficiency. A massive digestive system and an optimized metabolic process allowed them to absorb nearly all available nutrients. There is no evidence that Argentinosaurus ever became obese or overloaded. Evolution had turned them into perfect biological machines. Slow, durable, yet almost unbeatable. When you stand taller than a 6-story building and weigh as much as 6 buses, you don't need to run. An adult Argentinosaurus moved at only 5 miles per hour, about 7 to 8 kilometers per hour. Enough to move through the forest, but not to chase anything. Even so, it didn't need to escape. Its enormous size was its living shield. Most predators of the time, no matter how large, did not dare attack a full-grown individual. Only Maposaurus, a meat-eating theropod about 12 meters long, had any chance of posing a threat, and only when hunting in packs. Even then, the targets were usually juveniles, because a single tail strike from an Argentinosaurus could crush the attacker's bones. No creature that ever walked on land was more formidable, one paleontologist remarked. The entire planet had to account for its weight. The body of Argentinosaurus is proof that nature once challenged itself. How large can a living creature become before collapsing under gravity? Argentinosaurus is the answer, the ultimate extreme of evolutionary scale. From its lightweight yet sturdy bone structure to its heart and lungs functioning like jet engines, to its extraordinary growth rate, everything about it pushed the final limits of what life can endure. Today, even with only a few vertebrae and a single femur remaining, the image of the Argentine lizard still astonishes all of humanity. Now imagine this. On an ordinary morning in the South American plains, the sun has just risen above the horizon, and you hear the ground shaking. Not an earthquake, but a titan returning, a creature taller than a 6-story building as long as 3 buses slowly walking across the 21st century. Its colossal shadow blankets the modern Amazon forests, and with every breath it takes, the ground seems to vibrate in rhythm. Argentinosaurus was a gentle herbivore, at least in its own world 90 million years ago. But if it existed in the modern era, this gentle giant would become a global ecological threat. With a body over 35 meters long and weighing more than 75 tons, it would need 100,000 calories a day, the equivalent of consuming an entire small forest. A single adult could eat hundreds of kilograms of leaves within 24 hours. Now imagine dozens of them. They would have to move constantly to find food, stripping vegetation wherever they passed, causing local ecosystems to collapse. Not only trees, but crops, grasslands, and human farmland would all be devoured by the Titan's endless hunger. Ecologists would face a nightmare. If Argentinosaurus consumed all the foliage in South America, the entire food chain would be thrown into chaos. Carbon imbalance, loss of shade, and the collapse of root systems could turn the Amazon rainforest into a desert in just a few years. And the irony is, Argentinosaurus would not be doing it intentionally. It would simply be living the way nature programmed it to live. A creature weighing 75,000 kilograms cannot take a step without consequences. With a single footstep, the pressure it exerts could crush concrete roads, collapse underground pipes, or destroy smaller bridges. If it walked through a city, the damage would be equivalent to a mobile building stepping on everything in its path. Houses, cars, infrastructure, all would be destroyed not because it was aggressive, but because it was simply too big to exist in a human world. If an Argentinosaurus wandered through Buenos Aires, a scientist joked, we'd need a rescue team, not traffic police. The scene would look like a disaster movie. Trees falling, ground cracking, dust and debris everywhere. A real-life Godzilla, except instead of attacking, it would just be looking for a place to have lunch. Now imagine a herd of 10, each 17 meters tall, walking slowly across the South American plains. The entire planet would have to redefine the concept of natural disaster, but the problem wouldn't stop there. Argentinosaurus was an egg-laying species. A single female could lay 10 to 15 eggs at a time, each almost the size of a basketball. If even a fraction of those eggs hatched successfully, then within a few decades, South America could be filled with young titans growing at a rate of 40 kilograms per day. No one could even imagine hundreds of giant babies wandering around looking for leaves to eat. They would take over farmland, invade the habitats of modern species, and could potentially collapse the entire agricultural system. From Brazil to Argentina, from the Amazon rainforest to the Pampas plains, everything would be changed beyond repair. And even with modern technology, controlling the population of such dinosaurs would be an impossible task. They reproduce faster than we can build fences, one conservationist remarked. And each one needs an entire forest just to live. If that truly happened, global governments would be forced to restrict their range, similar to how we manage wildlife today, except this animal is the size of a building. The first idea would likely be a Titan reserve, an enormous protected area in Patagonia stretching hundreds of miles, surrounded by electric fencing. It sounds reasonable, until you realize each Argentinosaurus is more than 35 meters long and 17 meters tall. A normal electric fence would be nothing more than a thin string to them, even if the voltage were strong enough to cause pain. A single push from one of them could break through kilometers of fencing. Moreover, since they had no natural armor, a powerful electric shock could injure or even kill them. That raises an ethical dilemma. Would confining such a creature still be humane? Conservationists would be stuck between two brutal choices. Let them roam freely and accept that humans might be crushed under the feet of titans, or contain them, causing them to slowly die from stress, lack of food, and limited space. In the human world, size has always meant power. But for Argentinosaurus, its size would only turn it into a victim of existence. It could not walk without destroying, could not eat without devastating, and could not reproduce without threatening the entire planet. We would face a strange paradox. To protect the world from this giant species, humans might have to do the opposite. Protect the giants from us, because once the last Titan returned, poaching would become inevitable. The rich and reckless would see hunting an Argentinosaurus as the greatest trophy achievement in human history. A gigantic living prize. Their eggs could be smuggled like prehistoric gemstones, and baby dinosaurs captured as exotic pets, or worse, exploited for commercial purposes. To fight this, conservation organizations would have to build a Titan protection force, reserves monitored by satellites, drones, and AI, partly to prevent the Titans from escaping and partly to keep humans from entering. Once again, humanity would confront the eternal ethical question. Are we conserving, or are we possessing? In a world where we cannot even protect elephants and rhinos from poaching, could we protect a creature 17 meters tall and 75 tons in weight? Scientifically, Argentinosaurus is unlikely to survive today. Modern air is thinner, with far less oxygen than 90 million years ago. Today's plants no longer carry the high nutrient density of the giant ferns of the Cretaceous, and rising global temperatures would make it impossible for such a massive body to dissipate heat quickly enough. Even its enormous heart, the same heart that once pumped blood through a 17-meter-tall body, would collapse under the pressures of the modern world. If an Argentinosaurus truly appeared today, it would likely die within a few weeks. Not because of hunters, but because this world is too small, too harsh, and too fast for a creature born in an age of giants. So the question, what if Argentinosaurus lived today, is not just an interesting hypothetical. It is a test for humanity. Are we humble enough to admit that not everything from the past can exist in the present? If somehow we brought them back, through genetic technology, ambition, or curiosity, then the next question would not be, can we do it, but should we do it? The modern world is no longer made for giants, not because we don't want them, but because Earth today has changed too much from the world that once sustained them. 90 million years ago, this planet was an entirely different place. The air was richer in oxygen, CO2 levels were many times higher than now, allowing plants to grow fast and dense, enough to feed creatures weighing tens of tons. Back then, Earth was warmer, its climate more stable, and nature vast enough to hold a 35-meter-long dinosaur without disrupting the surrounding ecosystem. But today, that world is gone. We live in a completely different era. No more endless primeval forests, no more dense atmosphere, no more rainy seasons that nourish trees tens of meters tall. Instead, we have cities, highways, greenhouses, and artificial fields measured in GDP. If an Argentinosaurus truly stepped out of the past, its own body would immediately betray it. Its gigantic lungs would no longer get enough oxygen to breathe efficiently. Its heart, weighing more than 400 kilograms, would have to work twice as hard to pump blood in a thinner, lower-energy environment. That enormous body would quickly overheat under a polluted atmosphere, where global temperatures are higher than they were millions of years ago, and humidity is no longer sufficient to release heat through the skin. Modern plants could not sustain them either. Today's agricultural crops are rich in starch but low in cellulose, lacking the fiber and energy needed for the massive digestive system of ancient leaf-eating dinosaurs. A single Argentinosaurus could strip an entire forest region within a few days and still remain hungry, because the nutritional quality of modern leaves is nothing like it once was. And even if there were enough food, this world is simply too small to contain them. Today's Earth is divided by highways, buildings, and borders. There are no longer continent-wide grasslands for them to roam for hundreds of miles. We can't even protect elephants and rhinos from extinction. How could we sustain a creature weighing 75 tons? The deeper we think, the clearer the answer becomes. Argentinosaurus didn't disappear simply because of an asteroid, but because of the inevitable transformation of the planet. Nature moved on to a new chapter, one where strength no longer lies in size, but in adaptability. When the age of giants ended, it opened the path for another form of life. Smaller, faster, smarter. Birds, the distant descendants of dinosaurs, learned to conquer the sky instead of the ground. And while the titans collapsed under their own weight, these lighter beings survived, proof that life always finds a way to evolve. They are Earth's answer to the question, how great can life become? And the answer is, it can become so great that the entire planet must adjust itself to contain it. Today, when we look up at the sky and see flocks of birds crossing the sunset, those are their remnants. Those tiny creatures carry within them the legacy of the dinosaurs, direct descendants of the giants that once ruled the Earth. Every flap of their wings is a whisper from the past. Every song they sing is an echo from a time when the planet still belonged to titans. They didn't disappear. They simply changed shape to survive. The words of an Argentine paleontologist standing in the forests of Patagonia, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson Argentinosaurus leaves us. True greatness does not lie in size, but in adaptability. The small creatures, swift, flexible, capable of change, are the ones that survive every upheaval. While the titan fell, life continued on, lighter, wiser, and ultimately, stronger. Looking back, we realize that the giants never wasted their existence. They lived, they reached the limits, and they left behind an invisible legacy. That every creature, big or small, is the result of an evolutionary miracle. Now only the wind remains, sweeping across the lands of Patagonia where they once lived. The blue sky still stretches endlessly, as if holding on to the silhouettes of the giants long gone. And in the distant rumble of storms, in the cries of birds across the South American plains, we can still hear the echoes of the past, the echoes of the last giant.